Boom, got it.
All right. You gave your consent to be
Yeah,
recorded.
I didn't accidentally push the wrong button because if you say push the wrong button, it doesn't turn off the recording. But I think it's awesome. It sort of jettisons you, and I don't think it turns on my camera until it does it.
Yeah, it's
But
like well, it's funny because like it seems like it sort of like just ejects you from the
yeah,
the
it
whole
just is like,
recording.
oh,
Like
you
you
want to
don't,
record? You want to be
yeah,
fun? Get out of here.
that's right.
So, hi, Andrew.
Hi, Brandon.
Do you have a plan? Do you have anything you want? I have something I would like to talk about. You feel comfortable with that?
Go for it.
Okay, so here at the Yonko LLC, we have, I would argue, successfully uh gotten rid of any new mugs. We have no new mugs have been created after we pointed out that we don't need new mugs in this world. And I
Right.
think we got rid of while critiquing someone else's work or trying to critique or review, which is a little different, someone else's work, getting rid of the phrase pretentious, right?
Oh yeah, yeah. We
Yeah,
were.
that's another thing we have successfully done. I think one of the things that we now need to get rid of, and it doesn't, if you need to keep it, I'm not going to sit here and argue with you. If you need to keep it, we can bring it back in a couple years. It's not like pretentious, which I don't think we should ever use. I think, because I was rewatching our conversation, I think
Mhm.
we need to, as a society, part of the Yonko LLC, get rid of the term nostalgia for 3 to 5 years. I think we need to get rid of that term. So
3 to 5 years. Yeah.
anytime that you want to comment on if you like something, I think you shouldn't. You should, if you go, oh, I feel this, you can feel it, feel that nostalgia.
Mhm.
But the second you think it, you go, oh, okay, well, what do I like about it? What makes me nostalgic about it? And don't just be like, well, I was a child.
Yeah.
That is an uninteresting answer. Finding the other things that pull, like, what makes a person like 1980s wrestling? Well, I'm nostalgic for it. Well, okay, that's doesn't really explain what you like about it, though.
Yeah.
What you like about it is the physique, the storytelling, the movement, the colors.
Mhm.
All of that, I think you can pull out a lot more information if you go over the hurdle of, oh, I feel nostalgic for something. If you can get past that hurdle, I think you have a better opportunity to find the underlying meaning behind things. And it's easy to go, okay, I know what I want to do and step away from it. And it's better to go, okay, well, what about this do I like so I can pull out from it?
Mhm. Yeah. I think the word nostalgia is almost kind of like saying, something is pretty. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
well, okay, like what is something, what is pretty? Like what makes it pretty? And that's actually like something that I talk to my students about. It's getting on that deeper level because like what is um and specifically actually about this topic about nostalgia, about memories, because one of the things that we talk about like at the beginning of most of my classes is um how music can make us feel. And one of the things that comes up every time, I can't think of a time that it didn't come up, was this idea of like sometimes music bringing back memories.
Mm-hmm.
And so the whole idea, because like, nostalgia can cover such a wide range
Mm-hmm.
of things, that what does it mean for you specifically, I think is a really important question to ask. And it's kind of, and there's also like so many levels that you can look at it. Like, well, okay, there's the nostalgia for you, there's nostalgia for different situations that you were in. It doesn't even have to be when you were young. It could be just nostalgia for, a friend. And what's actually kind of most fascinating to me, I think, is the idea of nostalgia. Like, you know, I've got students now who were born in 2008 or something, um, and they,
2008, you
yeah,
said.
don't even talk to me about it. So,
Holy heck. That's okay. Time keeps moving
yeah,
forward. Not everyone gets to have that feeling, but Jesus
yeah,
Christ, eight.
yeah. So, so, you know, but they were born in 2008, but they are big fans of 80s music. And it's like,
Mm-hmm.
okay, so you almost have this like cultural nostalgia that,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they were born 20 years after the 80s, but they can still relate to that feeling, of the
Mhm.
nostalgia that 80s music provides. So that's kind of the most fascinating to me is like when you have this kind of cultural nostalgia, I'm like, what brings that? I'm like getting to that like on a deeper level because the 80s, is going to mean different things to different people. Some of it's the
Mhm.
wrestling, like you were talking about. Some of it's the hair bands, and some of it's I mean, for some people, I guess it would be like the wealth that was in the 80s.
Yeah.
So
I
there's
mean
there's a lot
that
of
is
different
something
angles.
worth exploring is when you talk about, oh, I think it is more interesting
Hmm.
that when you go, oh, I like this, and you go, instead of being like, oh, I'm nostalgic for it, go, what did you like about that time?
Yeah.
Even especially the idea of like, oh, I'm nostalgic for a time I wasn't alive for. Well, that's not what that word means. So instead of misusing that word, why don't you show me the happiness and sad? Why don't you tell me about the happiness and sadness
Hmm.
that you feel about that time and the things that bring joy from it and the things that you wish you saw now that you don't
Hmm.
see. Like I am a big lover of 90s recordings,
Hmm.
especially if I can find them. Because I'm also but the depth to 90s recordings is lovely. And it's funny that I bring this up and then I immediately disagree with myself a little bit because I was thinking about if you listen to early 2000s music, right? Or like, yeah, 2000s music into like 2001, that block style of recording that Rick Rubin,
Yeah.
everything is the loudest it can possibly be because we're trying to get people to stop on the radio,
Hmm.
is okay. So I would not argue that it is good, but I have warmth to it. But also, I know what that looks like and sounds like.
Hmm.
And I think I can suss out the immediacy. Good, I'm bringing it back. The immediacy
Hmm.
of that style of recording and the very right here fretness of it.
Yeah.
I have a lot of warmth towards it because that's what being 15, 16
Yeah.
angry white boy felt like at the time is, yeah, I'm right here. And that's
Yeah.
that Rick Rubin, everything is right up front, is an interesting reflection of where I was at in my own life, which I
Yeah.
think
And
is better
that's
than going, well, I'm nostalgic.
exactly. And I think that's a really key part of like growing up because I find the same thing like the music from when I was 14 or 15 still
Mhm.
has that really special place in my heart because of you know there are the memories that I have with my friends
Mhm.
like even just driving on a car or like the experience there was different than you have now so if I if a band comes out with a new album you're hearing it on the radio but then you're also purchasing that CD
Mhm.
and so that experience kind of goes along with that feeling but it's also at least for me it's the time where the world was wide open and
Mhm.
anything is possible and to a certain degree my optimistic self still feels that way
Mhm.
but I've also lived for many more years
Mhm.
and realize uh I guess my own limitations and my own experiences and my own regrets that I've had so that kind of for me represents a time where everything was possible and like you could live forever and anything you could do anything you wanted to.
Yeah, and everybody was a genius, man. Everyone
Yeah.
was just on the brink of being a genius.
Yeah.
Uh, but I'm interested. I will say, instead of exploring nostalgia, I think it is better to explore how those songs were recorded and why those were
Mm.
recorded that way.
Yeah.
That being said, it is one of the few arguments. If you ever want to listen to AC/DC,
Mhm.
Kiss, probably the Beatles, I would suggest trying to find the original recordings of those because the remaster is the proof why nostalgia doesn't work because those three examples they sound like someone playing music in a room
Mm.
and then we flattened them out so it sounded like how we think music sounds in a room, not how it actually
Mhm.
exists in a room. And you can pull that information out a lot easier than just going, oh, I feel warmth towards it, but I don't feel warmth towards these new recordings. I think it's they set, that you have to find, and it's interesting because this happens in sort of 8-bitty video games,
Mhm.
is they don't play like the way you think. They don't play the way
Mhm.
they used to play. They play the way you think they used to play.
Mhm.
And they have done a very good job in those indie 8-bitty games to suss out the feelings
Yeah.
that you played, not the realities that you played with. And I think the way you have to do that is you have to figure out exactly what the good thing is. You can't just go like, oh, I love this. You have to go, this part worked. Everything else did not feel good, but this part felt so good that I'm going to build on it over and over and over again. And I think that
Yeah.
is a good way to look
Mhm.
at the past, is to figure out the part that works and don't just go, I love all of it. Go, this is the part that works. This is the part I do not like. And then be able to suss that out. I think in video games, you're very successful about it. They're very successful
Yeah.
about that.
Well, yeah, and I think that that's been done on TV as well, TV and
Mhm.
movies, because when you watch something now that is portraying like the 80s or the 60s or whatever, or even the 1800s, it's like then you're trying to represent that idea of what might have been beautiful about that time, right?
Mhm.
And so it's not necessarily picking and choosing, but it is choosing things that are going to give you that emotional response.
Well, I think in some ways I think you are correct. I think it
Yeah.
is picking and choosing. And I'm sort of always fascinated with, and something we don't talk about is uh, what the past looks like from the lens of
Mhm.
the past. And we can now sort of see that.
Yeah.
Hammer films, which are these 1970s, 80s horror films that usually take place in the past, they're wearing huge 70s collars.
Mhm.
And it looks like the 70s still. And we never you never look at the past. You look at the past through the lens of the present you are currently in.
Right.
The selling point of this is completely authentic is a relatively recent invention
Mhm.
in media. If you were to look at how Shakespeare would do his history plays, they were wearing Victorian garb. If you were to see Julius Caesar, they're
Yeah.
not wearing togas, they're
Right.
wearing Victorian stuff.
Yeah.
And that is, so the idea of like, oh, we got, the underwear is right and everything's perfectly right,
Mhm.
is an invention of the last, honestly, 20, 30 years, if
Yeah.
that. And I think one of the lies we tell ourselves is that we are now able to, successfully recreate the past in our in that successful recreation of the past is something that is in and of itself worth
Mhm.
the price of a ticket. And I think it is a
Mhm.
convenient lie that we are not always looking at everything through the eyes of the uh, current situation. And once
Yeah.
you are able to move past that, you can see all those different lenses a little bit clearer, and you can use them in your art making as well.
Mhm. Yeah. And I think, well, yeah, and I think that that can sort of manipulate the way that you feel about that certain era. Um, I know, I grew up in the 80s and 90s, so I know what it was like just from a personal level.
Mhm.
And there's a certain
You
amount
know what
of
it was like for you for a person.
for me, yeah.
Yeah.
Um, and so there's it's kind of a weird thing because I love um phones. I love all the modern technology and stuff. Like I mean, this kind of relates to what we were talking about last week, because I think that if back in the 80s and 90s, there was that set time where you had a TV show that was at a specific time. Like, I'm not denying there was something beautiful about that, but
Mhm.
but I also can't deny that I uh like to turn on Netflix and watch whenever I can.
It was also
So
terrible. Yeah.
yeah. So there's a lot of conveniences that I think have made society better. Of course, there's bad things that go along with it, and stress and things like that. But it's uh but the point I was getting at is that, like, if for some reason I was transported back to the 90s, like I'm confident that I could survive the 90s because I I know what it was like, you know. But like, you know, I love the show Mad Men, for instance, you know, and the way that it's portrayed, you know, in the 60s, you know, is a very romanticized kind of portrayal, you know, and it would be fun, you know, to sort of live in the 60s in one sense, but I also don't know if I would want to go to work in a building that doesn't have air conditioning, you know, or watch TV like that only has one channel, you know, or
Or deal with
you
all
know,
the racism
or
and
deal with all
sex
the racism. Yeah. So,
and the smoking inside.
and the
Man,
smoking. Yeah.
I'll say in 2000, I think 10, we
Mhm.
probably pretty much got rid of most smoking inside, and that was just a good call.
Oh my
I
God.
don't know
Yeah.
what we were thinking. That's the end of this episode. I'm
Oh,
glad we got rid of smoking inside.
yeah. I remember the day that happened in New York, actually. Uh,
Wow, did you smoke inside for it?
we were, so I remember we were at a bar. It was like turning over at midnight or something like that.
Uh,
And so, I mean, of course, like no one's going to call the cops like between 12 and, you know, 1 in the morning.
yeah,
But I mean, at the same time, like there was a definite distinction between 11:59 and 12, you know. So,
I love that story. That
yeah,
that that story is short and wonderful. Okay, next week I want you to
yeah.
bring a word that we can't use anymore.
All right. Deal.
Yeah.